Chapter 22, Resurrection. Resurrection. Light played in red on the inside of her eyelids, the murmur of voices echoing in and out of focus as she gradually became aware of the rough wool beneath her, the cool air moving through her nostrils, and the pain that amplified with every breath. Somewhere a fire popped, and she was instantly aware of its warmth along one side, welcome in the chilled dampness of her clothes, the cloth still infused with the reek of smoke and sweat.
They salvaged what supplies survived in the kitchens. There should be enough for tonight. And tomorrow. Let's worry about that then, Flower. Indeed, we have quite enough with which to be getting on. You're frightened, aren't you? I admit, I am worried. The speed at which those clouds gathered, that was no true storm, it was her. What troubles you? Druids may control the weather as they please. Yeah, I've seen you do it yourself more than once. A gift granted by Sylvanus. This is unnatural. She is awakening.
Hands upon her shoulders, Fritha was afraid to open her eyes and invite more pain, a no-man's voice urgent above.
Fritha, can you hear me? Are you hurt?
She was almost tempted to ask if he wanted to narrow that down a bit. Everything hurt, her body used by something not accustomed to having the limitations of bone and muscle. Thirst scored her throat, her limbs trembling with the effort as she made to sit, hands crowding in to help her, the movement stirring up the stink of her unwashed body, and she wondered how they could stand the smell. Her vision was clearing to find them all sat about her, hunched and haggard under a gloaming sky, a no-man, and Valigar's beards unkempt, while the clean-shaven Ithik looked like he was well on for growing one of his own, thick bandages wrapped about his barrel of a chest. Aruna was next to him, the girl a twin of Imoen, both pale, dark rings puffy under their eyes, Brianna on their other side with Minsk, the Rashami offering her his usual grin, while Brianna's smile was more subdued, right arm hanging limp in a sling. And within that circle were pressed their three, a no-man knelt on one side of her, Fritha shifting forward as she realized he was taking most of her weight, Solafane on her other, a hand hovering at her elbow ready to help, Jahara apart from everyone, already up and stirring whatever was hanging over the fire.
You found me?
Fritha croaked, instantly wishing she hadn't. They shared a glance about her, Aruna venturing,
Imoen, well, Imoen has been having dreams of where you were.
Fritha nodded, letting another part of her mind make sense of this as she took in the plains about her own group gathered at that fire, while all around those who had survived were camped similarly upon the grassy meadow, blankets and bedding mats salvaged from smoking black ruins behind them.
Was I out for long? A few hours,
offered Jahara, a hand steadying her own as she passed her a steaming cup of tea.
I found no serious injuries, but you were suffering from mild exhaustion and your nose was broken. A no-man healed it, though it'll be a while before the bruising goes down.
Imoen tried a shaky laugh.
You look pretty scary. I'll live. Yes,
the druid continued in a sigh, narrowed eyes traveling the plains unlike many others here.
Fewer than 50 of the prisoners managed to survive, the rest lost to the fires. Most of the guards are either dead or fled, but a few remained to help tend those left. Enric Carstill is one of them, yes.
But, Fritha pressed, putting aside even her tea in her confusion,
but why has everyone stayed here? Because many do not know where else to go. They are fugitives here, sought by the army and bounty hunters alike. We cannot just leave them to their fates. How long before some fools among the citizenry try to bring them in for coin, it would be chaos. We were waiting for you to awaken before we decided our course.
Fritha went back to her tea, letting the movement mask her doubts. Saravik believed the children were likely doomed anyway.
We need to hide them. We can't just leave them to wander the land.
Minsk was nodding wisely.
Yes, as Boo knew you would say. And just how can we hide 50 people?
Challenged Brianna, the woman wincing as she made to shift closer.
We all saw what happened here. These people are a death sentence to anywhere who will take them in.
Imoen's face furrowed in an ugly sneer.
Yeah, Bree, we all know how you think we're not worth saving. It is not that. You said as much in.
Enough, barked Valigar, ignoring the women's outrage at this interruption.
We must stay focused and find a place for these people. In the mountains, perhaps.
Considered Anomen, gaze on the arid, brown foothills beside them. Valigar shook his head.
Perhaps a few could hide up there, but all of them? Food would be hard to come by there as it is, they would never survive, not half-starved as they are. Could we take them with us to Amkithran?
Piped up Erina.
Melisande has been telling other children to meet her there. No,
said Fritha.
I'm not playing into her plans, whatever they are. I may know of a place,
said Jahara slowly, as though she was loath to offer it.
The Grove of Druids where I spent my childhood is well hidden by Sylvanus's grace. I could ask the great druid for sanctuary there.
Fritha nodded. This sounded to be their best chance.
So we... No,
cut in the druid firmly.
We have delayed our travels to Amkithran for long enough now. I will take those that wish to go with me. You must meet with Melisande as was originally decided.
Fritha recognized that tone. This was an order, not a request, the girl forcing down the bristling anger that another had risen in her absence, and the swelling sorrow that she was so easily replaced. Her answer kept neutral in the pulling tides of emotion.
As you wish. Well,
sighed Jahara, seemingly relieved they had all managed to get through their discussion without a fight.
That is decided then. The grove is in far the east of Tethur in a forest to the northwest of the Omlarandin mountains that run north from Saradush almost to Riatavan. I will take the barge and we can sail all the way back to the mere on the Aegis. From there, we can skirt the edge of the forest and join the river Ith just east of Marmont. There, I would hope to acquire another barge and sail the rest of the way. The Ith runs past the forests of Ozif. If we can make the entire way by boat, I would imagine the whole journey will take just under 210 days. 210 days is a long while,
reasoned Ithik,
and you'll have to come all the way back here and further to get to Amkithran. The mere is sprawling enough, don't you think they could hide out in there? Yet,
agreed Imoen,
isn't there that temple Fritha and Solafane visited? They could find shelter there.
But Brianna was shaking her head.
I would advise against it. The groves have seen the death of enough children, that place is tainted.
Fritha whipped to her.
How do you know that? Saravik said. Saravik.
Cut in Imoen,
you've been talking to Saravik. No, her first. How do you know about the groves?
Brianna looked wholly taken aback, the woman throwing an injured glance to Anomen as she explained,
from my studies at the temple. Many Tormites were within the numbers who stormed the mere and destroyed the temple there. Indeed, the whole tale is well known to my church. Baal foresaw his end and scored a mortal progeny from which to be reborn. Then, when the gods were sent to Toriel, Baal was killed by Sirik, just as my lord, Torm, killed Bane.
The frown deepened.
It is the gravest injustice that some gods were returned to life afterwards, while others, mercifully, remained dead. There, satisfied.
Sighed Jahara, she clearly was.
And now what is this of Saravik? Nothing,
Fritha muttered, face dipped to her tea.
I just dream about him sometimes.
She almost missed the hasty glances to Imoen.
Dreams?
Demanded Jahara.
What kind of dreams? Just dreams, he tells me things. Such as? Just things about the prophecy,
Fritha faltered.
That I should take up my birthright, and seize power, the usual rubbish. It says it's Saravak, but it could just be the essence trying to manipulate me.
Hazel eyes bore into her.
And is that everything, Fritha, everything? Yes. Stop twisting on. Truly, Fritha.
Jahara continued, the woman seeming to grow taller in that instant of grim triumph.
Because I have recently come to learn that you are daughter to one of Baal's highest priestesses.
Fritha ignored the shock about her in her sudden rage.
You!
She shrieked, a finger flung furiously at Inomen.
You just couldn't wait to go running to her, could you? Fritha, I did not.
The drow was suddenly unable to meet her eye.
Fritha, it was not he. Solafane? Do I have a single ally left in this group? Fritha, we are all your allies,
pressed Jahara earnestly.
I know of the temple and your childhood there you are beginning to remember, are you not? This anger you feel, this hatred of the world, we can help you, Fritha, but you must trust us. I know it may seem beyond repair now, so far in the past as it is, but the pain will ease if you speak of it, whatever they did, however they may have hurt you. Hurt me?
Fritha cried, hardly able to believe the depths to their mistake.
They loved me. My mother loved me. Not that raped, broken shell of a woman that Gorion invented, but my real mother, high priestess of the twin temples. She loved me and he killed her and took me off with tales of assault and violation. So tell me now, who hurt who?
Silence, those about her staring back as though they had never seen her before, and perhaps they hadn't. Fritha was too thirsty to waste her tea on some dramatic exit, the girl drinking it slowly down to stagger upright.
I'm going for a wash.
The voice halted her after only a dozen paces.
Fritha. Hey, wait. Hello Imoen. Hello Imoen.
Her friend cried, pink as her hair as she caught her, earnest and wide-eyed.
I mean, you can't just say all that and then, Fritha, why didn't you tell me?
Fritha frowned, wondering that herself.
I don't know, I just didn't feel like talking about it. You felt like talking about it to Solafane and Inomen,
the girl accused quietly.
They caught me at bad moments. You never mentioned anything about having dreams, or did that only start after I had left? Exactly.
Fritha sighed, cupping a hand about Imoen's downcast face.
Sometimes there are things we aren't going to want to talk about, it just makes them more real, when all we want to do is let them fade. It doesn't mean we don't trust each other. We're still friends, aren't we? Yeah, course,
Imoen chirruped, pulling back to bounce a fist playfully into her shoulder. Fritha forced a murmur of laughter, eyes drawn to the camp they had left. Inomen was trying to check on the women next to him, Brianna stern as she dismissed his attentions. Fritha watched them with a frown.
What's happened between those two?
Her friend shrugged.
Nothing that I know about. You should have seen them both when you were unconscious, it was hard to tell which of them was more worried. Brianna didn't leave your side. She and Inomen seem close. Not really.
The slyest of smiles.
Maybe you're just jealous.
Fritha didn't have to force that laugh.
I'm sure I have better things to worry about right now. Yeah,
breathed Imoen, easily tempted back to more interesting matters.
I can't believe your mother was a high priestess, and here in Tethur, too. This whole thing just seems to get bigger and bigger. What do you remember of the temple? Was Saravik there? Was I there? No, you weren't there, and I just remember flashes of the place really, some rituals, and other more mundane things, evenings helping to seal the jars of incense in the sacristy, or milking the goats in the courtyard before they were taken back into the hills.
Fritha smiled at the distant memories, and she could almost hear the shouts of the other children as they played on the umbra of the Wildeth's gloom, the temple guards momentarily distracted as they threw lots in the dusty earth.
It was nice, they did care for us, Imoen, even if it was only because of what we carried. My mother, she would call me Malal-Daj, her shining pearl. She was a Kalamshite woman, then. Not by her looks, she had my coloring, though her eyes, I remember her eyes were blue. As from where she hailed before she came to the temples, I do not know.
Imoen heaved an uncharacteristically melancholy sigh.
And then you were brought to Candle Keep, was it so bad there? No.
Fritha admitted slowly.
Gorion cared as he could, Beth and a few of the other sages were kind to me, and it was all much better by the time you arrived. But it's hard, remembering my time there and the tales Gorion told me. So much of my life feels like a lie, I feel like a lie, that this person I am, this Fritha, is just an act, a nicer face to her, that girl at the temple, that girl I should be. The Karaturans believe that how you should live is all decided before you're born. The astrologers consult the stars and draw up a horoscope to decide your path, that nothing will come right until you accept who you must be.
Her friend had her own blunt take on this thousand-year philosophy.
Well, we aren't in Karati, you are, so you'll just have to make your own fate like the rest of us.
Fritha sighed a laugh.
I suppose so.
Next to her, Imoen's face had taken on an apprehensive frown.
And it is true what you told Jahara, isn't it? That is everything.
Fritha swallowed and quirked a smile. If she could lie to her then, she could lie to anyone.
Yes, that's everything. Mother was a high priestess and I sometimes talk to Saravik's ghost. That's the lot, I promise. Honestly, Imoen.
She continued, a hand squeezed about the girl's arm even as she took a step back.
I've got to go for a wash, I smell like a troll's armpit. Well, I didn't want to mention it. I'll see you later then.
And Fritha watched Imoen head back, a spring to her gait that couldn't be faked, and leaving her feeling like the most horrible friend in Alta Real.
My lady,
Inomen huffed, trying to keep pace with the tall woman as she strode on, the long grass parting before her like water.
My lady, really, it should be examined now the swelling has gone down. It is fine, Inomen. Now, if you would leave me, I would make my prayers.
Inomen paused a moment, allowing the woman to get a few steps ahead, her shape quickly fading to little more than an outline in the twilight, before he plunged on after her.
Brianna, is something wrong? Ever since that evening on the boat you have been avoiding me.
He knew it was so. In fact, her company had been much missed, though Brianna herself seemed content to deny any difference.
Avoiding you?
She laughed haltingly, no break to her pace.
You are mistaken, Inomen, we are the friends we always were.
He lunged forward, hand catching her shoulder.
Then you will stop and allow me to check your arm.
Brianna whirled back, shaking him off and seemingly about to berate him for so rudely laying hands upon her, dark eyes flashing in the gloom when she abruptly averted them, thrusting her arm at him with fierceness that likely hurt. The woman flushed in her temper as he eased it from the sling and pushed back the sleeve.
The bruising had reduced quite a bit, it looks as though the break mended cleanly. As I told you, she sighed tersely, may I depart now?
He released her with a nod. Brianna half turned to go when his voice halted her again.
My lady, I cannot claim to understand your manner of late, but if you are worried perhaps of repercussions with the order concerning our most recent actions, or that my own decisions will corrupt your path, then I can only ask your pardon.
She was staring back at him, broad, tanned face twisted with a hesitation he had not seen in her before, her thin lips pressed into an uncertain line.
Anomen, I must make my prayers.
And she was gone, marching off through the grass, dark braids swinging with her determined pace. Fritha had walked for quite a way, following the river upstream past the blackened ruins of the camp, until charred bodies no longer polluted the flow, the girl moving down the grassy bank and climbing onto the rocky slope that had been gradually deposited in the bend by the slowing water. She had just stripped there, uncaring of the fact she could be seen should anyone arrive, that first plunge stealing the breath from her lungs as she waded to the middle and ducked under the icy flow. Upon the rocks once more, she had scrubbed at both body and clothes with soap, hair a mane of suds before another swim rinsed her clean. Her laundry was laid out halfway up the grassy bank to dry now, Fritha seated next to it, dressed in the clean clothes Imoen had placed in her bag along with the other treasures she had left behind, jade stone, key and ring rattling as she drew the cord over her head. It felt good to have the pendant about her neck again, under her tunic and hanging just above her breasts, a tangible link to a person it seemed she was fast leaving behind, and she had just finished combing her hair when he arrived.
Hello Solophane,
she called as his figure crested the slope above her, the elf's wary frown easing at her tone.
Come sit by me, your company is always welcome. I am glad of that,
he murmured, settling on his cloak beside her.
I had worried. I am sorry I betrayed your confidence, Fritha. Jahara caught me off guard and I faltered. I had to tell her something, for if not, she would have known something was wrong and could have pressed you or others for the truth of it. With nothing else to offer, I gave her that. It's all right, Solophane. Even a few hours ago, I would have exploded at you, and quite unreasonably I might add, but not now.
They shared a smile, wan and weary, Solophane reaching for the small linen bag at his hip, a feast of apples, bread, and cheese hidden within.
I brought something for you, you are looking thin.
They ate in silence. The twilight was closing about them, an orange haze deepening above the bank as fires were lit across the plains, a mirror to the sky above, as one by one the stars emerged. Fritha turned away from the light, attention on the glistening black of the river as she chewed the sour bread. Solophane shifted next to her, readying his question.
You spoke to Saravuk again.
Fritha just nodded, explanation and decision both put aside for the memories they had stirred, eyes upon the indigo sky as she sighed deeply.
I miss how life used to be, in Candlekeep, yes, but even traveling the Sword Coast and was so different to how things are now. I miss my theatre, and the coronet, and laughing with Ari and Nalia. I miss the formalities, too, can you believe? Like taking tea and tugging a sleeve when to touch someone's hand was too much. They must seem pointless to you, such stiff customs, but I liked them, I liked we had time for them. Now everyone's just grabbing hands and making deals without even a tea leaf seeing the pot, all signs of our desperation, I suppose.
She swallowed, determined to be dry-eyed when she told him.
Saravuk knows what is to come. When enough Ballspawn have died and enough essence has been accumulated at his old throne, one of the children will step forward to claim it. They will most likely become Ball, destroying the rest of us and much of the Sword Coast into the bargain, or that person tames the essence to their own will and becomes a god themselves. Godhood or annihilation, Saravuk said I was lucky even to have the choice. Is it wrong to want more? But whatever I want, my path is clear now.
She forced a watery smile.
I'm sorry, Solafane, but I don't think I'm going to be able to show you the Sword Coast, after all.
He sighed something in his own tongue, arms closing about her, and she allowed herself a moment enveloped against his shoulder, her world reduced to that loosely bound curtain of snowy hair and dark, lithe neck, the man smiling sadly as they parted.
Ah, Fritha, I think in my heart I always knew it would come to this. I can't deny it isn't how I would have chosen, but I could have the chance to end this nightmare for a lot of people, so...
Fritha trailed off, nothing more to say. And it seemed Solafane agreed with her, the man easing himself to his knees.
Are you returning to camp?
A moment to consider the questions and apologies that would have to be made, and Fritha shook her head.
I'm too tired for that right now, I think I'll rest here for a bit.
He rose with a nod, and Fritha watched him go, blue linen robe pulled over her as she lay back in the grass and closed her eyes. It was time to end this. The wind tore at her tunic, loose hair whipped about her hair in a halo of copper snakes, the rough breathing behind her almost lost to its howl, and Fritha turned to find them both stood side by side, one the macabre image of herself, the other towering over them in a monster's form, instinct and essence. Saravik was lain a few paces away, the pool of blood beneath him a vivid scarlet that was a joy to the eye in that subfusc wasteland. The monster stooped towards her, spines flexing as it raised hammer and axe.
You are mine.
Fritha nodded.
Yes, I know, and you are mine, and we will have to work together if we are going to get anywhere in this. You know what we must do.
She glanced to the body next to them.
I need him, too.
A pause as the creature considered it, and the blood about Saravik faded, Fritha stepping closer to poke a boot into his ribs with slightly more force than was necessary.
Awaken, brother, we have much to do.
Piercing grey eyes blinked open, the man finding her only to start back, hastening to his feet as he noticed the hulking shape that loomed behind her. Fritha smiled.
Don't worry, we're all on the same side now. Leave us.
She added to the two at her back,
we will need to talk.
A comical moment where instinct and essence shared a look, before they too faded, brother and sister left alone on that blasted plain. Saravik looked on with an appraising frown.
You have mastered the taint, sister.
Fritha snorted wryly.
Let's just assume I've appeased it for now. There's something I need to know, Saravik, something important. For someone to ascend, how much essence needs to be collected?
Saravik shook his shaggy white head.
I do not know, sister, but all signs show that much is there already. Perhaps the deaths of just a few more powerful ballspawn.
He paused, face opening with a grin.
Or many, many weaker ones. And then there's enough power and someone claims it. And they become ball,
he finished for her.
Or they manage to master the power and become a god themselves. And the other children still left.
The man shrugged evenly.
They're to kill or spare as is wished, I would have slaughtered them, but the remaining essence could merely be harvested over time, as a natural death claims each one.
Fritha squared her shoulders to the coming challenges.
Then that is what I must do. You.
Saravik confirmed with unflattering surprise.
Yes, me. I will kill this 5 and any others who rise up to claim the essence, and I shall master it myself.
Saravik flared to sudden life.
Yes, sister. Seize murder's throne as is your right.
Fritha snorted.
I don't care about being a god, but if I can ascend, then perhaps, just perhaps I can stop Ball returning and save the rest of the children, too. And if not, then maybe when I become Ball, enough of me will still be left to curb his lust for vengeance, and damn that river of blood to barely a puddle."
Her brother's face twisted with an angry sneer.
"Do not let this pathetic nobility weaken you, you must thirst for this, crave it with every fiber of your being as the rest of them do, or you will fail." "What do you care?"
snapped Fritha.
"You're only here helping me because too frightened to face your punishment in the hells as you deserve. You had better hope Bal does come back, because he'll likely be a whole lot more merciful to you than I intend to be. You'll beg to be returned to the abyss."
Saravik stared back at her, mouth suddenly wide as he bellowed an astounded laugh.
"You have a potential I never knew, sister. I will help you, Fritha, as I said I would, even at risk of your vengeance. Perhaps a lamb may succeed where we lions failed."
Fritha shook her head, feeling that wistful smile pulling at her mouth.
"I am no lamb, brother, no longer."
Imoen shifted back from the fire, the night's chill not enough to keep the heat from a discomforting intensity, those about her bright of face and cloaked in shadow as they waited for the soup to be finally deemed ready by a slowly stirring Minsk, Jahara leaving him the task of ensuring it did not burn as she and Inomen had disappeared off to continue tending the wounded. Imoen had been more disappointed than worried when Solafane had arrived back alone, the drow informing them he had left Fritha sleeping, before taking up his bag and returning to her, Inomen watching him go with an unreadable look. Across the fire, Athik was in quiet conversation with Brianna, Valigar shifting next to them, the man barely lifting his attention from the armor he had been checking for the last hour now. How lucky for him there had been so much to do after the camp had fallen, his avoidance of her was hardly noticeable. A rustle behind, Erina appearing from the long grass, Imoen nodding her greeting.
"Hey, you all right?"
The girl shrugged, smiling as she took a place beside her.
"Just a bit tired, the magic always takes it out of me. You?" "Yeah, the same,"
Imoen murmured. It was so much easier to agree than to admit that sometimes, when the magics flowed through her, it felt like she could draw on it forever, the power that filled her endless and infinite. Though perhaps that feeling was not as well hidden as she was content to believe, Erina's voice carefully conversational as she added,
"That first spell you cast, I don't think I've seen it before." "No, me neither, but I was scared for Fritha, without too much time to direct it, and that was the result."
Erina just smiled, no censure in her admiration.
"It was certainly potent for your lack of focus." "Yeah,"
Imoen muttered, brief frown thrown to the man opposite.
"You weren't the only one to notice either. But it's not the first time. Aurelia said that the magic is in my blood, almost like a sorcerer's would be, that I can direct it into spells, rather than summon it for them as mages do." "Aurelia? Was she one of the mages back in Candlekeep?" "No, in Sultanacellar. She helped me understand the power within me. I never knew much magic until, well, after Spellhold, everything was different."
Imoen tried not to sigh as she felt that weight settle upon her.
"I wish I had someone here who knew as much. I used to practice my runes with Ari, the elf who used to travel with us, but Fritha still knows more of those than me and I didn't find them much help anyway. A sorcerer in the group would be better, but I can just imagine how well that would go down with some of us."
Another scowl to Valigar, the man oblivious as he finally laid down his armor and rose to leave that bright circle.
"He's worried that your power comes from Bal?"
asked Erina, finally noting her frown. Imoen laughed tiredly.
"No, and that's the real joke, isn't it? The fact my dad's the god of murder is nothing, but watch me cast a drying cantrip and he's all scowls."
Erina sighed her sympathy.
"Yes, I noticed his wariness. I heard him telling Athik once that he believes magic corrupts. I thought with you two courting that perhaps he had changed his view."
Imoen said nothing. For a short while she had thought the same. Arana sighed again, gaze lingering a moment on the charred ruin that was slowly fading into the darkening sky.
And now dragons and armies stalk the children, sometimes Bal's return feels almost inevitable. I've been speaking with Jaehaera when she leaves for the grove tomorrow. Ithik and I are going with her.
Imoen could not keep the disappointment from her voice.
You're both leaving? Yes, though to be fair, Ithik would have likely stayed. But when I told him I was going, he decided to come too. We'll travel with Jaehaera, help the other children as we can and protect the grove with them until all this has passed. I don't mind dying for this cause, Imoen, it's just killing others I can't bear, and with soldiers and mercenaries both after the children now.
She trailed off, but Imoen knew what she meant. With half of Tether after them, the potential for bloodshed was high.
But I understand,
the girl pressed,
what you have to do and why, and I believe in it. You are just stronger people than I am.
The shadow that had fallen upon their conversation was mirrored suddenly over them, the pair of them glancing up to find Valigar stood behind, Arana filled with a sudden need to help Minsk at the fire. Valigar gestured to the patch of flattened grass she had left.
May I sit? You don't need to ask,
Imoen muttered coolly and sounding rather like that could be in doubt.
I'm surprised you even want to, I thought you were avoiding me. No,
the man countered,
but you are only just reunited with Fritha. I thought you would need time to see her and perhaps adjust to what was revealed here.
They both knew this was a lie, but Imoen hadn't the energy to challenge him just then, the girl summing up her fatigue with the world in a weary shrug.
Fritha is as she always was. I don't care who her mother was and neither should anyone else.
A pause between them, Imoen watching Minsk stir the cooking pot with a contemplative frown.
Arana told me her and Ithik are leaving tomorrow, they're going with Jaehaera and the rest of them. I see. They will be missed. Yeah, they were a laugh. And I've just realized too late I could have learned a lot from Arana if I had thought about it.
A sharp glance to her.
Learned? You mean your magic?
Imoen nodded, inwardly defiant in face of his obvious displeasure.
Yeah, though not so much about spells, as connections to the weave and how it can be used and, what? I did not say anything. You didn't have to. Look, I know how you feel, but, the magic is a part of me, I can't just ignore it.
Valigar raised a cool eyebrow.
I would not ask you to, but does it stand you should encourage it?
Imoen felt like she could explode.
Yes, it does, actually, because in case you haven't noticed, magic, for all its evils, is a pretty powerful weapon. I need to learn how better to harness it. You know what is to come, this could be the difference between life and death.
Valigar turned back to the fire.
You know your path, you do not need my approval. No.
Imoen sighed, she was a fool for even hoping for it.
I know you're worried. Vals, where it comes from and what it could do to me, but I can control it. The magic and the influence it has.
He whipped back to her, looking like he was just wrestling himself away from grabbing her shoulders.
How are you so sure? I have seen it, Imoen, good people destroyed by the power it holds. I know, and I'll be careful, and you are here to keep an eye on me, too. Please, Valigar.
She sighed, willing him to understand.
To be honest, I'm more concerned about the dreams at the moment. They are continuing. No, they've stopped as of last night and that's kind of the worst part, just waiting for what I'll see next.
A long pause where both were lost to their own counsel when an arm snaked across her shoulders to pull her closer, though Imoen felt it was more a reassurance for him than her, his braids tickling her cheek, the smell of smoke and sweat mingled with the familiar scent of his body.
It will be fine, Imoen.
Imoen said nothing, just leaned into him, and not for the first time wondered if it really would. The sound of water drew her from her dream, the slow gurgle of the river harmonized with the nasal ee-wit of the lapwings. Fritha threw off the damp robe she had slept under, stiff muscles groaning their protests as she slowly sat. It had felt as though she had slept for an age, awaking on a new world, as a new person, anointed with dew, the bright sky above already a faded blue, eastern clouds gilded with the dawn. The patch of flattened grass next to her indicated she had not spent the night alone. The sudden appearance of her battered old lute case, the runes to seal it still scratched upon the lid, showing her just who had been there. Fritha straightened her clothes and drew a shuddering breath, her hair a mass of damp curls that she could do little more than gather back and pin in place, hands and arms heavy, moving as though in a dream. She felt strange, almost like her body was not her own. She had spent so long in uncertainty that now having a true path, a true final goal felt alarmingly focused. She just hoped it was not all too late in the coming. Footsteps in the soft earth, the rattle of wings as the lapwings scattered somewhere above the bank, Fritha kneeling to see Inomen looking hale and striking as he strode across the mist-coiled plains, the low sun glinting on buckles and mace, his cheeks ruddy with his pace and breath misting in air that still held the morning's chill. He saw her watching to raise a hand in greeting, Fritha only noticing the steaming cup he held a moment before he passed it to her.
Here, some tea. I would have brought it earlier, but Solafane said you were still sleeping when he arrived back at camp this morning.
He eyed her wet sleeve with a frown.
You are soaked through. Just the edges.
Inomen smiled wryly, clearly expecting this dismissal, hand at his hip as he moved to unbuckle it.
Here, I thought you might be missing this.
Fritha just stared at the blue enamel scabbard, her sword holding a muted shimmer in the early light, and she remembered, in an instant, the delight of being given it, the joy of finding it again in trade meet, and now it was there before her, waiting to be taken up once more and finally end this story.
Fritha.
A hand unconsciously reached up to close upon it, her words holding more meaning than any language could express.
Thank you, Inomen.
The man just smiled and nodded once, throwing down his cloak to settle on the grass beside her, Fritha drawing a sip of tea as he began.
Once you are ready, we can return to camp and set off. Good. Will Jahara be traveling the first few leagues with us? Our paths are similar enough in the outset and I would talk to her.
A moment of hesitation, Inomen forcing himself to face her as he offered,
Fritha, Jahara has already left. She thought it best to keep as much of their movements covered, and they departed just before the dawn. It was apparent when we awoke this morning, that some of the others had left in the night, but that was their choice. She left with only 30 of the children in the end.
Oh! Fritha swallowed, not trusting her voice for any more as she felt the emotions rise. That Jahara had left on such a dangerous undertaking, and she had not even awoken her to share a farewell.
Well, yes, that makes sense.
Inomen could not meet her eyes.
She said she did not wish to wake you, but to reassure you of her welfare, and her wishes to see you well in Amkithran soon.
Fritha smiled wanly, he never could lie to her.
No, she didn't, Inomen, but thank you for trying to pretend she did.
Fritha tried a laugh.
There I am again, reducing you to falsehoods. They do say a rotten apple spoils its neighbor.
The man said nothing, a moment of silence letting the swelling awkwardness usher them onward.
So, we will head out to Amkithran and continue our search for this 5. Yes,
agreed Fritha.
With any luck, that Melisande will be there by now. We can see if she has any more information on this Sendai woman, and ask her about Abizigal as well. If he is in command of dragons, then of the 5 or not, he will need to be dealt with. I will have to speak to Aruna about what sort of spell could be used to control such a creature so magically potent in its own right.
Anoman was looking hesitant again.
Ah, Aruna has gone, Fritha. She and Athik departed with Jahara this morning.
Another dry swallow. Did any of them have any faith left?
Oh, I see. Well, that eases my worries somewhat over Jahara's safety. How many days is it to Amkathran? About a 10-day,
Anoman answered promptly.
If we head back north from here, we can make most of the journey by road. Valigar believes we can escape notice if we are careful, perhaps we can even travel with another caravan. Perhaps? Well.
Fritha sighed, finishing her tea and making to gather her belongings.
We should.
Amos placed sweep of her arm, the empty cup she had set upon her loot case taking flight, and they watch its slow arc down the bank to smash upon the rocks below. Fritha stared down at the glistening shards, all that frustration and misery rising in a howl to the bright, uncaring sky.
Will nothing come right?
The large hand landed heavy on her back, warm after her night laid upon the cool grass, rough palm moving in a slow circle as she sobbed.
Fritha, Fritha, there now, you do not have to do this all alone. Yes, I do.
She cried, overcome in her despair.
None of you understand, you don't believe in me anymore, and I don't blame you, because I'm doing it all wrong. I used to be so good at this, without even trying, and now. Back in the camp there was this girl, Jayole, we were planning to escape together when she betrayed me to the guards. I was so angry at the time, but it was my fault. I was so impatient that she could not see the importance of our task. I hurried her along with threats and challenges, when I should have just reassured her, told her she would have a place with us, told her I was her friend. I'm so horrible now and I hate it, I hate everything. I hate you and me, the land and the sky and everything. I see the caravan and Saradush, I come to places like this, and see the horrors people would inflict upon each other, and a part of me wants nothing more than to see this world drown in blood and fire, because there is nothing in it worth saving.
Anoman was staring down at her, aghast, when 2 hands had suddenly clamped about her arms, their mouths sour and hot with the tea she had drunk as his lips pressed to hers with such fierceness, that she could still feel their throb as he released her.
Anoman.
His breathing was coming quick, face glowing and holding the same open-mouthed surprise as hers, Fritha well aware she was likely goggling like an idiot as she hiccuped.
And what was that? Well, your pardon,
he mumbled, clearing his throat uncomfortably and suddenly fascinated by his knees. Fritha just stared at him, still agog, before she sighed and shook her head, a watery smile emerging as she dabbed her eyes.
Well, while not the most popular method of stopping people crying, I can't deny it worked. I don't know about not the most popular,
murmured Anoman, clearly deciding to try his luck twice in one day.
I rather enjoyed it.
Her burst of laughter banished the last of her tears, her joy given form in a playful slap to his arm.
You daft sod.
But a look from her, and the cup was as whole as it ever was, the girl calling it to her to drop it lightly into his hand.
There, at least I can fix something.
Anoman smiled gently.
Nothing has happened yet which would need fixing, Fritha. This war, what we see about us and what we must do, it leaves us all with doubts. But Jahara will come round, in time, as will they all.
He paused, eyes that matched the sky above gravely holding her own.
We do not follow you because we must, Fritha, we do so because we believe in you. Don't,
she quavered, the lump already rising.
You'll make me cry again.
Anomen grinned with a boyish cheek.
Well, fortunately, I have an excellent cure for that. Oh, bugger off.
He had offered to leave and allow her to change into something dry, but Fritha assured him her clothes would lose their dampness as they walked, and they made the short distance back to the others together in a friendly silence that gave Fritha a proper chance to gather herself. Before the cold ruin of the camp, the grasslands were empty, their own group looking small and huddled as they packed to leave on that vast open plain, Imoen sending her a weak smile as she looked up from her pack, Valigar and Minsk busy folding the canvas between them, while Brianna barely spared them a glance as she bustled over the fire in Jahara's usual task. So few of them left, it already felt as though the group was broken beyond her fixing. A stolen glance to the man beside her, Anomen seeming to understand enough to give her shoulder a reassuring squeeze, at least she had one ally in this. Make that two, she considered at a nod from Solafane. The rest, as Anomen said, would come in time. End of chapter.